Saturday, but just so that you're all aware. All right. Okay. So welcome everybody to the pre-SA Champs briefing. Unfortunately, really not enough time to have it in person. The agenda for tonight is just goes through the code of conduct, safety and awareness. Sorry, safety and fairness. Okay. So if everybody could just mute themselves. Everybody just. All right, everybody hear me. Okay, so safety and fairness, duties of officials, we're just going to run through it briefly. Try and concentrate on areas that we haven't really done before. Objections, motorboats and piloting, radio protocol, general, and then questions. So why are we having this workshop? It's really a refresher for all officials before SA Champs. And I want to concentrate on tasks that we don't always perform at all of the regattas, and just a summary of the officials' duties. So the code of conduct, I know this is 2 pages of quite a lot of information, but I think it's important for us to remember, you know, as a rowing official, we got a duty to provide all participants, to all participating athletes, quality and fair sporting environment, and friendly, instructive and safe. So it's important to know your rules of racing, be punctual, reliable, impartial, and unbiased. Very important. Behave appropriately, show respect and tolerance for all, contribute in a constructive manner, respect other people's rights and dignity. No aggressive behavior. I don't think we're going to be carrying any dangerous weapons, hopefully. No intoxicating substances, unfortunately, prior or during duty. Care of all property that you are assigned, and be sensitive to the needs of the athletes. Take responsible action to ensure the safety of all concerned. But in the same breath, we have the right to be treated with respect and express our personal opinions freely and participate in decision making. But we need to be objective and support our colleagues and give others a fair hearing. So attending meetings and participating in decisions, but then respect the democratic decisions that are reached. Ensure accuracy of information, communicate through the right channels, have a positive attitude and encourage, inspire and instill a sense of fair play. Then we will earn the respect of the rowers and colleagues with our behavior and setting a good example. So good discipline and implementing the rules of racing consistently and fairly, sensitive to the rowers' needs, take appropriate action and listen to them when needed, and create and maintain a good environment. Participate, good sportsmanship, be firm yet fair and respectful. And then we will have we need to be co-responsible with the coaches and the parents, and accountable and self-disciplined. So strive for excellence and be professional, punctual. And those are the codes of conduct that really is important. But then our major principles, as I'm sure we should all know by now, safety, number 1, and then fairness. Orderly running of the regatta and ensure an enjoyment for rowers. And obviously the adherence to the Maritime Safety Authority rules and things. All right, fairness. Show respect to the opponents and to the regatta officials. So they need to be at the start on time, follow instructions of the officials, but the officials need to ensure that the rules are applied fairly and the atmosphere of respect to all competitors. So we always need to remember those that I'm sure we go through always. Okay, so let's have a look at the duties of officials. So Control Commission really is the hub of everything. So that's where you're going to do checks for the athletes. So we will be performing random checks. That will be online checks. The clubs have had to should have put their photo IDs and updated everything on the system. They have been notified of that, and the organisers provide a laptop. There is Wi-Fi. Hopefully, we don't have Eskom playing any part in that. And so hopefully that information is up to date, and there will be checks that will be done for that. Then weighing of coxswains, coxes and weighing of boats. So the weighing of the coxes and the boat weighing will be done in the Old Ed's shed, which is the one right on the end. So that obviously the coxswains sometimes we weigh at Control Commission, but it's better to have the boat weighing and the cox weighing together. On Friday, there are no races that have any need for coxes to be weighed, but the boat weighing needs to be open for the athletes to check their boats, and it's their responsibility to check those boats ahead of time. So the cox weighing really only starts on Saturday and Sunday. At Control Commission, we also would do a courtesy check of cox and boat weight. And by that, I mean, it's not our responsibility to make sure that the coxes go out with their ballast. But it would be nice if we can to say, if it's an under 19 boat, you know that it's a cox race, just to say, just a reminder, if you're carrying ballast, don't leave it behind. We don't want to, it's nothing worse than the poor cox forgetting it in the shed. So it's not a necessity, it's not in the rules that we have to say it, but it's more a courtesy at that point. The cox's ballast can be checked at the incoming jetty. Those are really that's the place that is going to be checked, and that will also be random checks. Now, when I'm talking about these things, our POJ, Carol, will be briefing every morning, and there will be specific things that she would obviously be addressing. So I'm just really going through the general rules here. Anything specific, Carol will bring up at her POJ meeting of what her requirements are for the regatta that she's running. But so if the judge at Control Commission says, right, we're going to go and do some random checks for this race, for these under 19s, let's go and check. She will then arrange for somebody to go and check the boats that are coming in and check when the cox comes in, that they have the ballast. They will have the bands on their arms stating what the ballast should be, and we can take the ballast and weigh the ballast. Sorry, I'm just admitting people here. Sorry, just interrupting there. Okay, so remembering that. Okay, so let's have a look at the normal checks at Control Commission before we go into the details of the cox weighing. So safety, safety, safety. So the bow ball is for safety. I know Craig had a really good information of how much the boat weighs, and if it's traveling at a certain speed, how fast it would be connecting with another boat coming in another direction, which was a very, very scary thought. So that bow ball really is for safety. So we do need to make sure it's firmly attached. The heel straps as well are for safety. Sorry, participants, people coming in here. Remember then your mother told you don't stand on the back of your shoe when you wanted to take your shoe off. Well, that's really what the heel strap does. It stops the shoe from passing through the horizontal. So if the person wants to get their foot out, the shoe would be held behind. So when you're looking at bunghole covers, the heel straps and the bow ball, just think logically and say, is this safe? That's really the thing that you're most concerned about. Is it safe? And then obviously, is it fair? The bound number is important for the tower to know that we've got the right, that they aren't upside down. Remember, if they're both upside down, the number needs to be the same. Check the size and check the color. There's a couple of schools that have very, very small bound numbers. If we can just make sure that those don't go out, because it's very difficult for the tower to see the number if they're too small. And important, always message from Selwyn, be positive. Rather say, if you you need to change. If you could do this, then you can row. Not you can't row. So please put the heel strap on so that you can go on the water. Okay, sorry, you lobby. Sorry, people are coming in all the time. Right.
Evelyn, I'm happy to accept them for you while you talk.
Oh, thank you, thank you. That will be very helpful. Otherwise, I keep getting distracted.
Yeah, I'll do the accepting. Don't stress.
Okay, so we won't go into detail here, and I don't think we have any of these shoes at this stage that are the clip-on like the cyclists. But the other thing is obviously the quick release. One quick hand movement. Unfortunately, I've nearly jumped in on 2 occasions this last season with people, crews who have tipped and haven't been able to, in a double and in a scull, who haven't been able to get their feet out of their shoes. So it's very important to make sure that those straps are definitely in place. Control Commission, the POJ will give information, will do a random draw. She will decide which boats are going to be weighed, and then she will inform you at that stage. And then obviously we have the possibility that the drug-free sport, that they will be there. Our duty, remember, is only to advise the row of the selection, and the POJ would obviously talk to the person who's going to be handling that at the time. But our responsibility is just to do the introduction to the person, the drug-free person, assist the rower to contact the coach or the person they want to be there, and then we hand them over, and that really is our responsibility done. I think we should all know those. Okay, as far as the coxswain's weighing is concerned, this is something that we don't always do. So we only weigh under 19 coxes. Now, the minimum weight for men is 55 kilograms, and for women is 50 kilograms. And then the maximum dead weight is 15 kilograms. You need to remember that it can't be water in a bottle, because they can turf it out and then fill it up at the end. It needs to be sand, and if it's a whole lot of little things, they should all be taped together. It can't be a backpack that the cox has on his back. And they need to weigh in 1 to 2 hours, between 1 and 2 hours before the first race of each day. The cox is a member of the crew, so remember, when you're weighing them, you're not going to weigh them. Yes.
That's 1 to 2 hours before their first race.
Their first race, yes.
Yeah.
So if they are in a race at 10 o'clock in the morning as a cox, and then again at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they need to weigh in minimum of 1 hour before, not more than 2 hours before their first race of each day.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have to come back. So whoever's doing cox weighing, you need to remember that you need to have a look on your hymn sheet and see other coxed races, or when they come to weigh, ask them if they're coxing any other races, so you can make a note of it. So you're not running around looking for a cox who's already weighed in for a race earlier in the day. So you just need to manage that quite carefully. So it's often really good to ask them, because they know if they're going to be coxing another race. Get your bands ready ahead of time. So there will be a different color band for people carrying cox, carrying dead weight, and for those who don't need to carry it. and then you write on the band what the weight is and how much they're carrying, so that at least it's on the cocks. They're not going to be weighed with their tackies, with their tracksuit, they must be weighed in what they're wearing to race. So the racing uniform. They mustn't have spanners and socks stuck up their tri-suits and things hanging around their necks. And so make sure that they don't have any of those things. So it's only the under 19s that are going to be weighing, and they can have a cox 2 age categories younger coxing. So those coxes are very likely to be coxing quite a few races. Okay. So the cox weighing, when you've got your hymn sheet, on Saturday, for instance, the first cox race is at 10:30. So therefore, their coxes need to come 2 hours before that. So they can start coming at 8:30 and no later than 9:30. So at 9:30, you should have everybody weighed in. And my suggestion is at that point, you then take it to Control Commission. Hopefully you've got 2 people there. Give them the information on that particular race, so that they know anybody who hasn't weighed in and what the cox, the ballasts are for those coxes in that particular race. And then obviously mark the ones that are going to be coxing other races that day. So it's good to prepare on your hymn sheet, keep a note, and if you write the time next to each race, you can see, okay, this is the window period in which they can weigh. It's obviously not for us to go and call the coxes, but we have been known to see a coach and say, hey, your cox hasn't weighed in, please send them urgently. Sunday, I think the first one is at 10:18. But the boat weighing needs to be available and open at all times, and 2 hours before the first race of the day. Okay, so that's the cox weighing. Now, in the same shed, we're going to have boat weighing. Now, the boat weighing, very important that people don't bang those scales, they don't sit on the slings, they don't just, you don't have crews coming in there and saying, okay, well, let's just drag the scales across the floor because now we want to weigh a different size boat. Should be able to, if you move the scale, it has to be checked again. It has to be reweighed. It needs to be checked that it is correct. We can't just move them around and say, well, we can now just weigh another boat after dragging it a meter around on the floor. So we need to be really careful of those things. They've been tested, they've been set up, and they should all be working perfectly. They need to be treated carefully. You need to have your list of the weights. It's not for us to tell a crew if they're coming to weigh their boat. It's up to them to check their boats ahead of time. And it's not for us to tell them, okay, your boat is fine, it weighs 15 kilograms. They need to look at the weight if they are coming and weighing it for themselves. You can show them the list of what the boats need to weigh, but it's up to them to check and to decide how much ballast they're either going to put in or not to put in. Don't get dragged into making commitments on their behalf, because then they're going to say, oh, the umpire said it was fine. So just be very careful of that. If the POJ has got you doing boat weighing for races that are coming in, then people who are coming randomly just to check their boats, obviously the boats that have been weighed that we have selected to weigh take priority over weighing of boats of crews that are just checking their boat weights. So hopefully they'll take advantage of that ahead of time and not come at the time when we're trying to weigh boats. So if you've got them set up for doubles and somebody suddenly wants to weigh 8s, then they're going to have to wait at least. So don't let them start dragging them around. So as I said, the boat weight is the crew's responsibility, and same as the cox weighing. It must be available 2 hours before the regatta. and Control Commission will notify the boats. Well, POJ will make a list. Persons responsible. If you've been told that lane 3 of race 20, obviously you go down, and don't go and wave the boat down. They haven't even got to the jetty yet, showing them, hey, we're going to go and weigh you. Wait until the boat's lifted out the water so the crew cannot put water on the shoes to try and make up weight, etc. Then you need to escort them to the weighing station. The boat must then be emptied of all water, so get them to turn the boat upside down. Tools, sponges, bottles, shoes, any clothing must be removed. Stroke coaches, Cox boxes. Now, anything that's not physically attached, so the speaker cables and those sort of things may be left in the boat. If any dead weight was taken, it must be weighed with the boat, and they must show you and identify it at that stage. And remember, the weight is 2.1 of a kilogram. So we drop off the other digits. If you weigh a boat, before your shift starts, make sure you've done the test of those weights, that you're happy that the scales are working correctly. When you weigh a boat, if it's over the weight, let's just go to this, weigh the boat. If the weight is okay, then end of procedure. Okay, if you weigh the boat and it's not okay, write it on the form. You'll see there's a typical boat weighing form. Write it on the form. And we need to make sure that there is a coach or somebody responsible for that boat there as well to sign on the form with you. And then take the boat off, and then you need to do test weights. So check that the scales, make sure the coach or the person there can sign that they're happy that you've done the test weights and that they're happy with the results. Then you put the boat down, get them to put the boat on again. If the weight is now okay, end of procedure. If the weight is not okay, then you need to put those results on the form, and that has to be signed by yourself and the coach. And that would then be boat underweight. Okay. At that point in time, I think, well, when the boat is underweight, you need to contact the Judge at Control Commission. I don't know, Carol, you're on the call if you want POJ to be called or the Judge at the Control Commission, but you need to notify them that the boat has been weighed and that it is underweight, because that will be a relegation to last place.
Yeah, I think I would probably notify POJ in that situation.
Yeah, so I'm sure that. Okay, so long as at least you've notified the Judge at Control Commission, they can inform the POJ so that can be attended to. So there's the typical weighing form. I'm not sure whether the Judge at Control Commission might want to come through to the boat weighing and make sure that everything is all in order and that all the correct procedures have been done, and that the forms and everything have been signed. Hopefully we don't have any of those situations. Cross our fingers, yeah. Right, I think I must just pause there for a minute, and just because this boat weighing and cox weighing is not something that we do all the time. Is there any questions or comments anybody wants to make?
Evelyn, sorry, could you just go back to that other page with the yeah. Sorry, I was just trying to screenshot it when you moved away.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that diagram's it's quite good because
It's very clear.
Easy to follow.
Thank you.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Just a quick one is that I know last time with boat weighing, we didn't want to be on channel 1 or 2. So we set up beforehand that channel 3 would be the channel, and that you would WhatsApp people who were involved to go onto channel 3. Otherwise, everybody just listens in, because it was a bit of a problem because somebody told somebody that a boat was underweight, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I think that communication is very important. It's not something that we want to just be broadcasting. And I mean, the umpires on the water are not necessarily wanting to hear about all the goings on the land of the boat weighing. So, you know, if there is a problem with the boat underweight, I think the correct thing would be to call the Judge of Control Commission. And who does that need to be communicated with? That's really Control Commission. And then the POJ can handle that and talk to the regatta control, so the regatta master, so that the results can be correctly altered. So when we talked about the cox weighing, you've got time to do the cox weighing. Once the time has passed for which they can weigh in, you can then take all those results to Control Commission. You can walk down there. You don't have to really put it on a WhatsApp or on the radio. And then Control Commission can get them all at the same time. The boat weighing, obviously, if there isn't a problem, you're only going to notify them if there is a problem, or if you haven't been able to weigh the boat. Sometimes boats, you might find that boat is being used in another race. Okay, so it went to boat swap and then it went out again. So then you obviously need to just notify POJ that you weren't able to get that boat, and then she can decide whether you're going to still bring that boat in once it comes back. So you'd have to keep a track of where that boat is. So yes, I think that communication of the information to Control Commission, we don't want to hog the radio for that. If need be, maybe a WhatsApp message to the Judge of Control Commission on their number and not on the general comms. Okay. All right, because the Control Commission administrator is quite a very busy person. Obviously at SA Champs, now we don't have any late entries. No late entries for SA Champs. The draw is done and dusted. There will only be changes that can happen, and obviously those must be within the rules of what is allowed. And if you're unsure, ask your Judges Control Commission, and if a Judge of Control Commission isn't sure either or wants confirmation, your POJ needs to make the final decision if you feel that there's a query with the change that's happening. You know, they can't move boats from one heat to another heat. Obviously, sculls can't be, you know, a crew. You can only change up to 50%, and you know, all the rules that we've all learned. Remember those rules. But just if you need confirmation, go to your Judge of Control Commission, and they can then also confirm with the POJ. So just remind yourself of those rules before you're doing that duty, and that will really, really help. So your Control Commission administrator is going to record the time that the boat is checked out, which is so important. Safety, and also knowing where the boats are, and if they should be down at the start and they're not there, where are they? And just keeping a track. Umpire will want to know where their boats are, but also particularly that we haven't lost anybody on the water and they in an altercation with the fishermen or something.
Can I
yes.
ask a question on that? Sorry.
Yes.
Just in terms of sending the WhatsApp out for the races all checked out, how many minutes before the start time of the race do you decide it's DNS if someone hasn't showed up, and you can send the SMS to say all boats except lane 6?
Well, you know, if there's work out how long should it take. They have to be there 2 minutes before their race time. And if you're going to the 1 kilometer, you know, I mean, they're going to take at least 4 minutes to do a 1K race. Well, just call it 4 minutes. They're not racing. They're going to be there 2 minutes before.
10 minutes.
So, yeah, 10 minutes probably. And then obviously if they suddenly come rushing down there, you can, you know, put another
Sure.
message to say, well, now they've gone out.
It's just frustrating, I think, for the umpires because you're trying to read WhatsApps in the sun, and then when something changes to a race 4 messages down, you might not pick it up when you're going to check your race. So I just wondered what the tightest limit was on that to make it efficient.
Well, I think it's not DNS because if they haven't gone through control commission, well, if you don't have them recorded as not going through control commission, that doesn't mean to say, you know, we've got to be very careful here because we need to make sure we are recording people who've gone out, because if a crew's gone out and the checker has not actually said and marked
Yeah,
it.
it could be a
okay.
mistake. Sure.
Yeah, okay, Carol has a comment here, please. Carol, go ahead.
Yeah, just to say, Evelyn, that so I think what's important is that a control commission, so firstly, Carol, in response to your question about at what point do we stop a crew, the only time you can absolutely legitimately stop a crew is 2 minutes before their race time. So if it's 3 minutes
I'm not
to go
asking
and
about
they want a
stopping.
boat, yeah, you're going to let them launch. So we're never going to prohibit a crew from trying until 2 minutes before.
No.
But in terms of and then obviously
Timing of
the
SMS.
control commission administrator isn't posting DNS. They're posting have not checked out.
Yes, sorry,
So
that's what I meant. Just so that
yeah,
there's not
so,
2 messages. I'm just wondering about the timing, so that there's not a million messages about one race, confusing the umpires.
yeah, so I would guess probably 4 minutes or so before, because you don't want to wait until 2 minutes before, because the marshal obviously starts gathering. So I would even say maybe as much as 6, so that at the point that the race in front is on the line, the control commission administrator should have posted about the next race, if that makes sense. At the latest. I think that is reasonable. Unless obviously they've got a full house and they can post earlier. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So, but to your exact point, that it is difficult when the messages get out of order and they start moving around. Yeah. And I think what's key is we all know the crime of assumption. So the fact that a crew has not checked out does not mean they are not on the water. So we all just have to be really, really careful about making assumptions. And that's where the marshal plays a critical role, because often the marshal will identify that a crew is on the water, you know, that maybe
And they
is
didn't
marked
come
as
through
not checked
control
out.
commission.
Correct.
Yeah, or they
So, but also with 5 umpires, you should actually at any one time have a marshal as the first line of defense, and you got control commission as your first line of defense, the marshal is your second line of defense, and then the umpire as your third line of defense. And if everyone's doing their job at those 3 stages, the probability of an error is almost 0. Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know if that actually answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I was just trying to get a timing for that because I've never done the sort of the WhatsApp. So I just wanted to know how long you wait to check that race out with a missing crew. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
I would say, yeah, no later than the start time of the race before. Yeah.
Thanks.
So I think Carol's point is very important about stopping crews, because unless the race is actually 2 minutes before, if you stop a crew from going and then the race ahead has a clash and then they come back and then their race only goes off 10 minutes later, and they say, but that umpire stopped us from going and now the race has only just gone off now and we could have made our race. Theoretically, they're going to get a yellow card and they're going to be late, yes, but you can't really stop them unless it really is 2 minutes before. Otherwise, you end up in all sorts of trouble. Okay, so the incoming jetty, the boat swaps, just remember that if it is a boat swap, you still need to check the boat. Doesn't mean to say that because it's gone out on the water that everything is still fine, and big reminder to make sure they change the bow number. You know, they're rushing to get out there. Just make sure that it is properly checked and that the bow number has been changed. Okay. Right. The next point now is our marshals. So hopefully we don't have that in the picture at the top there. So the marshals is critical, really, really critical. And during the season, we have a lot of races. It's just junior or just senior. So the marshal at 1K is really crucial because you have to know there's races coming from the 2K, and you can't be putting your crews on onto the course. But you also don't want them scattered all in amongst each other. So if you could try and group them, that also helps. So racking and stacking is the marshal's main objective, but they can't rack and stack until the 2K races have come past. So there's a bird hide a little bit down from the 1K on the opposite side. So if you've got a wind that is blowing the crews towards the 2K, be very careful that they don't blow to like 500 meters down from the 1K, and then the marshals rushing around trying to find crews that they know are there, but they've drifted halfway down to the 2K. So try and give them a point of reference and say, please don't try and drift past that bird hide on the opposite side. That is a point that they can kind of try and get them to gather together. So the scullers, that's your race over there, go with the scullers, the doubles over there. And then be aware of which race is coming past. Umpires, please allow the marshal to do their job, because if you come rushing in there, calling crews in amongst with the marshal and the boats, it starts getting a bit chaotic. Rather ask the marshal, what boats do you have for race 23? And then they can give you the information, because they're the one who's gathering everything and watching the boats coming past. Be careful that they are not crews racing through at the 1K. They need to adhere to the traffic pattern, and they mustn't race through that holding area. And then don't let the crews drift onto the 2Ks. You could be very aware of what the wind is doing, because if the wind is blowing them onto the course, you've got to watch them all the time. If the wind is blowing them down to the 2K, you've also got to be careful of them. And then the moment the 2K races have gone past, if the umpires go on, so that the marshal has a point of reference to say, race, these colors line up, that heat line up in front of umpire 3, behind umpire 2. It just makes it a lot easier, and just make sure they don't drift down too far, because bringing them up, that can really delay things a lot. So that 1K marshal is a critical position, and you could be the difference between us being on time and not on time. So just be very aware of where everything is and what is happening around you. And don't forget that when you're talking to somebody in front of you, to be aware of boats coming from behind. We've had incidents where crews are coming down, remember they're going backwards, and they crash into the marshal who's stationary in the middle, chatting to other crews in front of them. So your pilot needs to be looking in you need to be aware of what's going on around you at all times. Definitely for a safety point of view there. 2K marshal, a lot easier job. Hopefully the marshal at the 1K can help you know if crews are coming past, if you're looking for crews. Any questions on the marshals or anything you want to add on there, Carol?
No, not in particular. Just I suppose sorry, I don't know what the right word is. Like general awareness. So even though there's a hell of a lot going on, the marshals really just need to keep a big picture view of the regatta.
Yep. Right, and then we have our liner. Okay, so our primary role of our liners to ensure the boats are aligned for fair racing. Remember, it's the only official that can call a false start. Keep to the regatta time. Your liner's assistant will have the pinger, we are going to have a camera, Carol. Photo finish.
Yes, my understanding is yes.
Okay, but then the assistant still also needs a backup stopwatch. So you got the pinger and you have a backup time for the assistant. Judge at the finish, quite a good idea to sometimes ask for a backup time, but don't put the aligner and assistant into a panic if you're just testing to see if they've got a backup and making sure they're doing it. Rather say to them, look, can we just do a test and let's do a countdown if you're wanting to do that. But the aligner's assistant, please, pinger, very important, starts the camera. So everybody understands there's a button on the aligner station, and that starts the time for the camera in the finish tower. So that's stopwatch and the pinger, most important to start that pinger, and you must do a test ping with the judge at the finish, not the judge at the finish, with the control tower before the start of the race. I'm sure they'll call for you to do that test to make sure that it's working. I know it says note scratchings and late entries, but you know, if there's nobody, if things are happening at the 1K, obviously the focus is on aligning and doing the pinger and the watches. If there is a break and all the races are going down to the 2K, make a note of the boats that are going past. Be aware of people who may be crashing into the aligner station, or drifting onto the course. Just watch for traffic violations and monitor for safety. So, aligning procedure. Yeah, I think people are getting quite creative with these. We need to remember what the calls are. Touch, okay? Touch and the distance. So, a boat length, half a boat length, a canvas. We all know what a canvas is. Well, really, really old boats. If you come to VLC, you'll find boats that actually still have canvases. It looks like a shower curtain. That's what was on the top of the deck of the boat, up to the bow ball, up to the area where you sit. So that is a canvas. So it's a canvas or a half a canvas or a quarter canvas. So touch and the distance, or back and the distance. Not forward because they're going backwards. So which way is forward? So keep to the correct commands. Hold for the crew to stop. Be very careful of the wind again. Be aware of the wind. If there's a tailwind, you need to get them to let the boat run, get them to hold before the line. It's a lot easier to ask a crew to touch than it is to back down. So rather don't let them run through, so that you have to get them to back down. And if you have to ask them to back down, ask them to hold. Don't wait and, oh, the bow ball's crossed and now say, hold it all, cruise, because they're still in the process of moving their boat. So give the crew a chance. You've given them an instruction to move, then say hold, and then make sure that they have done that. And then you will raise the white flag to indicate that the crews are aligned. Hold it all, cruise, and don't hold the white flag out while aligning. Hold the white flag up, and the umpire can see that the alignment is in order. So that looks pretty good in that picture there. So the crews must be aligned properly, especially for senior and A events. But again, remember that if there's a crosswind, you can't see if the boat they're aiming at each other, that the umpire can see. And the umpire, obviously, not to set off a race just because the aligner said hold it or cruise, if two boats are actually heading for a collision and aiming at each other because they're at such a bad angle. Only use the red flag if there's a false start. And a good idea, ask Rory to tie the equipment to the aligner platform So if there's a big wind, you don't end up with it all in the water. And preferably not to leave the platform unmanned so that crews can row into it. So aligning, I think we've got experienced aligners this weekend, but obviously watch what the timing is, and if the umpire can hand over to the aligner in time for them to actually be able to align. So it's no good if you as an aligner get the 8s when they are only a meter from the start. It's very hard to actually get them aligned when they're that close. Right, the umpire. So check that the course is clear before starting the race. There's no very slow crews. Maybe the umpire ahead of you has notified you that there's a very slow crew, or there's a boat that's tipped on the course. Get changes to the schedule from the marshal. As I said, let the marshal do their job. And very important, the 2-minute rule. So the crews need to be ready to race 2 minutes before race time. And the race needs to be started on that race time. Yellow cards for crews arriving after those 2 minutes. And remember that if crews are missing, do not start the race ahead of time. We shouldn't really be starting ahead of time. We should be starting on time. But definitely do not start a race ahead of time if you are missing crews. Make sure your pilot calls in the race and wait for the pilot to complete before calling in, before you start using the megaphone. Also, the umpire's job to check for dress code. So we know that they must all be the same. I think some of our schools have been sponsored, and hopefully they're all going to be matching. Give them the chance to say, if you have a real problem with the dress code, say to the crew, lane 3, dress code, allow them to see if they can rectify it. So if they've all got different hats on, if they take all the people that got different hats, take them off, then they've corrected it. Same for they can't take their undershirts and leggings off, hopefully, but they need to be a neutral color and not compromise the racing uniform. And sunglasses aren't controlled, so that's fine. Okay, so very important to do the roll call. So even though the marshal has told you all your crews are there, they may all be there, but you want to make sure that you're actually getting the right ones in the right heat. So, for example, you got a Benny's in lane 3 in heat 1 and a Benny's in lane 3 in heat 2. You want to be sure that you have the right Benny boy in that particular heat and not the wrong lane 3. So do the roll call, ensure all the correct crews are going with you, and call the crews to the start. Hand over to the aligner. I say again, said not too close, but not too far out either, because the crews may not be able to hear the aligner, but give the aligner a chance to align. Hold the red flag horizontally. The finish tower would really appreciate red flags that are hanging nicely and are very visible. And wait for the aligners, hold it all crews. Now, when the weather is bad, it's quite easy the moment the aligner goes, hold it all crews, all you want to say is attention go. But you can't have hold it all crews, attention go all in one quick succession. So you need to call to attention, raise the red flag, check, make sure the aliner's white flag is still up, and after 1 to 5 seconds, go. Make sure that you drop the red flag to the side at the same time as you say go. And then obviously make sure the aligner does not call a false start. So very important that that flag comes down at the same time as you saying go. Now, one of the things that we don't often do, and hopefully we don't have to do it either, is if it's really, really bad weather, and the umpire feels that it would be a really good idea to do a rolling start. It is the umpire's decision, but you need to confirm and consult with the POJ before you go ahead and just decide that we're now going to do a rolling start. And it needs to then be the same procedure for all the races in that event. So you need to inform the other umpires, and you need to inform the crews and explain what happens, because just as much as we haven't done it often, the crews haven't done it either. So it's not there for making up time. It's only really if the weather conditions are really bad. So that we're going to do that, you would do the rolling start. So let's just run through the procedure here. So the umpire will call the crews from about 100 meters out, and they'll hold the red flag out waist high as you would once you would have handed over to the liners. You're holding it out, and instruct the crews to start rowing up to the start and keep them in line. So telling them to catch up, slow down, keep in line with each other as they slowly row up to the start. As they approach the start, the liner, once they get close to the start, the liner can see if they are really out of a line, and the liner can get them better into line, but they don't stop rowing. And when they're close to the line, the liner, without stopping the crew, raises the white flag and says, "Prepare to race." And then the umpire says, "Attention, go," without a pause. So you don't have that 1 to 5 second pause. You have attention, go. So they don't stop rowing, they carry on. So the liner says, "Prepare to race," and the umpire says, "Attention, go." Okay, happy? Any questions on the rolling starts? Comments? Carol?
Evelyn, if I could just say two things. One, just on the rolling starts, in principle, all the heats of an event should have the same start. So unless you are the umpire taking down heat number 1, you should not even be considering a rolling start. The only reason for it, like Evelyn said, it is the umpire's decision. The only reason we ask you just to confirm it with the POJ before you go ahead is that there might be something in the bigger picture that you might not be aware of. That's the only reason. And then just going back one step to the normal start with the umpire's flag, it's actually less about the finish tower and more about the athletes on the start line. So often the pilots are having to maneuver their boat, and depending on the weather conditions, they might need to spin their boat or spin your umpire's boat almost on the start line. And what we would then ask is that the umpire, you must be perpendicular to the course at all times. So even if you're facing backwards on your motorboat, if that makes sense. So you must be perpendicular to the course, and it's convenient for the finish tower, but it's actually about fairness for the athletes. So for anyone who sat on the water, and bearing in mind that the umpire should be sitting in the middle of the course, ideally at the start, it's so that everybody has a fair visual on the flag. Similarly, with the loudhailer, you should really be facing forwards, if at all possible, with your loudhailer when you announce your start, so that everybody has, because if your loudhailer is angled towards lanes 1 and 2, anybody who has rowed will tell you that the crews in lane 6 and 7 are at a disadvantage, for example. Okay, so the flag perpendicular to the course and the loudhailer facing forwards, unless it is not humanly possible. Okay, and that's in the interest of fairness.
Good, very good point there. Another thing on the umpire starting the race, and I think we're going to need Carol's input here as well.
Selwyn's just got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Selwyn. Yes?
I presume we're using the start tower, so the starter umpire will be on the start tower 2,000 meters. So the slides you've just gone through is the starter umpire, and the umpire will then be the next slides.
No, I don't think we have a starter.
Why not? then I suggest we use one of the marshals to do starting, or even use both marshals to do starting.
Up to Carol.
Selwyn, I'm certainly in support. It's something I'd like to discuss with Rory and possibly yourself in the morning. So if we could meet before the officials briefing and let's chat about it. I'm certainly very much in favor of using the Star Tower, but there's obviously reasoning as to why the regatta was organized not on that basis. So I think we just need to understand it first before we go down that road.
Okay.
Okay, so just something else on the starting. If we do start running behind, umpires to be very careful about making up too much time too quickly, because that has lots of ramifications. So for instance, if a crew has 40 minutes between two races, and we start running a little bit behind, and then you decide to make up some time, and you make up 10 minutes, and now all of a sudden that crew now only has 30 minutes between their races instead of 40 minutes. It's also not just the crews who might be affected, but it may also be boats that are being used from one race to another race. So just be careful that we can't run half an hour late and within 3 races we suddenly make up, and we're setting off races too close together. So the tower, I think the gap at the moment is 6 minutes. I don't know, Carol, if you think, what's a maximum you could make up it on a race is between 1 minute that you're letting off a race with a 5-minute gap or 4-minute gap, but you can't suddenly be setting off a race with 2-minute gap in between because you just want to make up time.
It's very discretional because it depends on what race is on the water. It depends what event you're dealing with. So unfortunately, there's no hard and fast rule. It's a discretionary call.
Yeah.
Be
Be aware.
The circumstances that are in front of you. The key really is that the umpire at any stage, you shouldn't just be aware of what your race is. You should be aware of the 2 races in front of you and at least 2 or 3 races behind you in terms of what are they, what boat classes are they, what age groups are they, so that every decision you're making, you're not just making it in your direct circle of sphere of influence. You're thinking about what's happening 2 races in front of you and 2 races behind you.
Yeah. So don't just try and solve your immediate problem. Think about whether it's going to affect anything else. Just be very aware and mindful. Okay, so your umpire, you're responsible for the conduct of the race. So after the command go, make sure that the white flag is used unless you are stopping the race. The moment you've done the start, the red flag must go away. I'm sure we've all seen Selwyn showing no flags flapping in the wind, please, either of them, because the crews are not quite sure why this flag is waving and you not meaning to wave it. Make sure that they are not flapping unless they're being used. And immediately follow the crews down the middle of the course. Please stand and be observant of all the crews. No sitting down and chatting. Stand and be observant. And instruct your pilot on your boat positioning. And obviously we don't want to wake any crews down, but we also need to make sure that we are protecting progressions, crews that are progressing and medal contenders. So you need to be aware of your progressions. They're on your hem sheet, so you know how many crews are going through. And if it's a final, obviously the medal contenders. So you can't be 200 meters back because there's a very, very slow crew, and in the meantime, the first 1, 2, and 3 positions are about to crash. So you need to just be aware of that. Obviously, safety. If it's a safety issue and you have to wash people down, then that's you need to do that. Right, so the crews can leave their lanes so long as they are not interfering with another boat, are not putting themselves in a safety risk. So they can't leave lane 1 and start drifting into oncoming traffic, or being, if there's any obstacle that they might be going to crash into. So they can leave the lane, but not if it's going to cause a interference or safety issue. Don't steer the cruise unless another cruise been affected, or there's an obstruction. If a cruise is told to stop rowing, then you need to obviously tell them to continue rowing. But the stop rowing really needs to be used when it's really necessary. Make sure that you're using the right instruction at the right time. So you call the crew, show the direction with the flag that they need to move in. Not 10 instructions, St. Benedict's and the flag. You can also use keep apart, and just remember safety of crews and boats. If you need to, if it's not possible to have a fair race anywhere, stop the race by waving the red flag. Sound the siren, call out stop rowing, and then remember you cannot restart halfway down the course. You have to go back to the start where the race started from, and either immediately or you need to check with the POJ if there needs to be a new start time, or if the race must go back immediately. So just notify, obviously, POJ, and notify the tower that the race has stopped and that it's going to have to be restarted. Umpire at the finish. So when you get to the finish, wait about 10 to 15 seconds to see if there's any objections. Look at the crews. Is there anybody with a raised hand? Is there anybody in distress, any medical condition? And then give them a chance, obviously. If there's no raised hands, show your white flag to the crew, and then turn and show your white flag to the tower. If there is an objection, then you need to go over, don't raise any flag, and don't assume anything. So you need to listen to the objection and either uphold or overrule. So you need to make a decision on the water and advise the crew of your decision. You can consult with the tower, what was the finishing order. You can consult with the aligner or other umpires, but you can't ask the POJ. Can't ask the POJ for advice or anything on your decision. So if we, okay, so the important thing is to really listen to the crew. Don't assume that they're going to object to something that you think happened or that you think they're going to say. Listen to what they are saying, and then make your decision. I don't know why I don't have that other slide of your. We look at those objections and things a bit later. Sorry, that slide comes further along on objections. The pilots, the umpire's pilots, the second set of eyes and hands, look out for obstacles, traffic violations, keep an eye on the crews during the progression of the race, and inform the umpire if you see something that's happening in lane 8 when the umpire is focusing on lane 1 or 2 or about to crash. Observe all hand signal requests from the umpire and listen to the radio should you be called. Very important that the pilot holds the radio open at the start of the race. So you're going to call the race in when the umpire is happy that you call the race in. So I do have some of these sheets here, but I think that's a bit small to see. So announce on channel 1 the race number, the event, any scratchings, any yellow cards, red cards, the name of the umpire, and change over to channel 2. So judge at the finish, stand by for the start of race. Whatever the race number is, heat or final, junior, men or women under whatever, all crews on station except for lane 3 that's scratched. And any other information, umpire Rory bringing down the race, changing to channel 2. Then on channel 2, you don't have to give the whole blurb again, but you do need to obviously give the race number and standing by and what the race is. If for any reason you need to stand down, just notify the tower as well, so that the poor people sitting there with their binoculars are not waiting for ages and thinking that you're about to start when you've actually asked crews to stand down and back down, and you're going to bring them back up again, but then give them a warning that you are going to that you are going to align the race again. If there's a restart, you need to let the tower know that you've had to restart the race, and you have to call it in again. The duties at the finish, the judge at the finish, primary role is to record the bow number, the finishing order, the crew's going across, hoot when the crew crosses, note and record the lane number, and acknowledge the umpire's clearing of the race. You can either do that with the flag or with 2 hoots. Hold the results if the umpire does not clear the race. Don't put the results through, and sign the sheets and send them down to regatta master. So the start timing officials will record the number of boats and the start time, and the umpire they'll be listening on channel 2, the name and number of the umpire. The finish timing officials, you make sure you use the same watch for the same official. It's usually a good idea to do that, but I'm sure your judge at the finish will give you instructions on the day. And your scribe, record all the details for the race, the scratchings, the DNSs, any yellow cards, red cards, all the information that you can on that race needs to be on that sheet, and record both times for the watches. 2 boats crossing the line at exactly the same time. If it's got progressions, the POJ needs to decide the course of action. If it's finals, then if it's a dead heat for second place, then there'll be first and 2 seconds, and there won't be a third. Finish tower stress, yes. Missing a start time. So check with the aligners, not the pilot, the aligners assistant for a backup time. Check if the electronic timing has started, and if there's no time on the race and its progression is by time, notify the umpire to stop the race, because that would have to be stopped and restarted. If it's a final, Carol? Okay, now the abbreviations. DNF did not finish. Sorry, go back there.
Sorry, Evelyn. Just on that, like, what happens if it's a final? Because that did happen and the times were cleared. So
if it's a final, well, it's going on who crosses the line first. Everybody wants to know what their race times are, and if the race has only just started, then you probably stop the race and take it back. If they're quite close to the finish, re-rowing them when really it's who crosses the line first who's going to get the medal is probably the most important thing. But if it's a progression, it's a problem. And if you want to say something here, Carol? Yeah.
So I know I'm stating the obvious, but the easy solution to all of this is to not miss the time, and to make sure that we have backup watches. So the key is obviously that the responsibility for the backup time is firmly and clearly placed with the assistant aligner at this regatta. But I would encourage it should be force of habit. If you are an umpire and you are waiting up at the top and you see a start on the line, you watch the flag and you start a watch. It should just be almost like subconscious. You shouldn't even be aware that you're doing it. So the very first line of defense, don't miss the start and don't clear what, so we get the time. Second line of defense is that the assistant to liner has a watch. Third line of defense is that somebody else has a watch on the course. The key is not to panic. So it's a fine line between making a fairly quick decision, because you don't want to let the crews get too far down the course if you realize that the issues happened in a heat right at the start. But you also, what is more catastrophic than not getting a watch and having to stop the race is stopping the race and then discovering that somebody did have a backup watch. So it requires very calm, level-headed approach. So the first thing the time box would do, they would radio the assistant would go, no, sorry, I also didn't get one. Then the time box would radio all officials, does anyone have a backup time? And then we wait for a response. And when you hear this happening, the radio should be clear, other than an emergency. So we establish with absolute certainty that nobody has a radio. The time box will then say to POJ, we can confirm that no one has a watch. And I will say to the umpire, you need to stop the race. So it's like I said, it's that fine line between doing it quickly, because obviously the further down the course the boats get, the more frustrated and irritated the athletes are. But you do not want to stop a race until you are 200% sure that there is not a watch on the race.
Okay.
In terms of a final,
yeah.
Again, there's no black and white answer. It's incredibly nuanced. It depends where the boats are on the course. It depends on the kind of I'm reluctant to put a statement down. Would I necessarily make the same call for under 14 sculls as girls first quads? I know both crews are entitled to the same experience, but not all equals are equal. So it would depend on how the regatta is running, what the weather conditions are like. There's so much nuance in it. So I think a final, we would make a call dependent on the race.
Cool. So Carol, just for my purposes of clarity, so if the times are erased and the judge at the finish called the boat numbers as they cross the finish line, that's how the race will end, and first place will go to, they just won't have a time then.
So
if it's a final, straight final.
Yeah. So if it's a final and the decision is that a time is not important, so also we know the crews in the races. So if we know that we've got a potential record-breaking crew, we might look at it differently. Do you see what I mean? That's what I'm saying. I'm reluctant to put a statement down. But that being said, if it happened right on the finish line, it's highly improbable that you're going to re-race them. You know what I mean? In which case, as they call, the position gets the medal without a time.
Cool.
Elwyn?
Can I make?
Yes, so if you're on a final and you've got no watches running, it's still a good idea to then at least get the gaps between the crews at the finish. That's at least some information.
Okay. So to let the watches to take the gaps, so to press the watch as they cross, so you have the gaps between the crews. Okay. Okay, so sorry, we're running quite late here. Apologies, guys, but I think this information is really useful. Just remember the words: DNA data not available, well, no time taken, boat underweight, excluded, disqualified, did not start, did not finish. Those are the the information. The links timing is running this weekend. I just got a message from Denise. Okay, president of the jury will, the boss and responsible for everything, basically. I don't think we need to, moving of races, holding of races, anything, land, water rescue, medical, weather conditions, jury meetings, course of action for dead heats. Yes, big job for the president of the jury, and please consult. I won't go into any more detail there. Let's go to objection at the end of the race. So a raised hand to indicate to the umpire. They must keep their hand up until they're noticed. The umpire must make a decision on the water and communicate their decision. So this very useful slide that I did get from Selwyn, that I think Selwyn inherited from somebody else, I think is wonderful. I always keep this with me on the water because it's very useful. So you listen to the crew, hear what the objection is. Has the crew been disadvantaged? No. Regular race. Has the crew been disadvantaged? Yes. Has it affected the ranking of the obstructed crew? No. Then confirm the result. If it has, yes, it has affected their ranking, then exclude the obstructing crew. If you've excluded that obstructing crew, will that give them back their disadvantage? Then if the answer is yes, then you can confirm the result with that crew excluded. But even after excluding that crew, if it still does not give back that the position to that crew, then it would have to probably be a re-row, but only between the crews whose ranking has been affected. So I think this is a very useful slide. As I say, I carry it with me always, and I think it's a really good reference when you are having an objection. We won't go into the protests and everything and all that, because it's not a training course, and that would be handled by the POJ, and you know the rules on those. Motorboats, make sure you have all your safety equipment. We're very lucky that they all get loaded now, but that doesn't mean to say that we mustn't check that we do have our life jacket, the torpedo to throw to the rower, a paddle, a rope for towing, a bailer, toolkit, first aid kit, that the dead man cutout is there, and that we do have enough fuel. Also, make sure you have your water, please, because I think that's also very important to keep hydrated. Remember the boat piloting skills. You yield two boats coming straight for each other. Always yield to starboard on the right-hand side and keep 100 meters distance between the two boats. Remember, okay. Okay, so if the boat being overtaken holds its course, the boat behind, always yield to the right, same as your traffic rules. And then remember, you're on the water. Where do you position the boat? Stop well ahead of the race ahead, and don't just turn off the course under power. Stop and then idle off the course. Remember that if you are going up and down the middle, the wake goes to the side. If you turn under power, the wake will go all the way down to the 2 kilometer and all the way up to the finish. So if you turn under power, you're causing a lot of wake, and that is really not good for any of the races or any of the rowers where there's unnecessary wakes coming down the course. So do not cross the course at speed. Make sure you position your boat, protecting the right crews. Don't get between two crews that are racing each other. Don't position your boat in between, but make sure that you are in a position to protect those crews if there is a collision going to be happening, that you're not miles behind. If there's a capsized rower, make sure that you can count the heads and that the rowers are okay and that you've notified rescue. And if necessary, you'd have to tend to the rescue yourself. So approach carefully, disengage the propeller, dive in if necessary. And yeah, so, but if rescue's there, the crews are all right, then obviously you can then proceed with your race. As far as the radio is concerned, you will be required to sign out your radio at Control Commission. So take the radio that's allocated to the position that you are in, and then you need to sign it back in again. Only use the radio when necessary. Identify who you are calling. So president of the jury, umpire POJ, umpire 3, and listen before you speak. Wait until previous call has ended before you call in. Don't talk over other people on the radio. Keep it short and simple. Speak slowly and precisely and avoid getting excited, because then nobody will understand what you're saying. And very important, stay off the radio during an emergency. If there's an emergency, then do not hog the radio. Don't get on the radio. Don't critique other officials over the radio, and don't engage in unnecessary chatter. Okay, general items. Ensure that you're familiar with all your rules. Read the regatta notice. Very important to know what's in the regatta notice. The traffic rules, so that you know what the training and racing traffic rules are. They are published in the regatta notice as well, and they should be displayed at the venue. Have a look at your rules of racing with an emphasis in the area that you're going to be officiating. Make sure that you are familiar with everything. Dress code, no jeans, arrive on time. Remember, if you're doing boat weighing and cox weighing, what times that you need to be there. Report to the POJ. Check with the POJ before you leave. And don't forget your clipboard, pen, hat, sunscreen, binoculars, rules of racing, well, handbook. And most important, keep calm. No shouting. When you start shouting, you're just losing the attention of the people and actually not achieving anything. Treat all competitors and officials with respect. And especially at the start, we need to ensure a calm environment. The crews are stressed enough as it is. The coaches have been giving them instructions. They're focused on the race that they've got ahead, and they don't need unnecessary chatter and shouting and chaos. So we need calm environment as far as we can at the start. It just disrupts them if there's chaos happening. Keep to the schedule. And remember that when asked, is the regatta running on time? Unless the POJ has set a new official start time, you do not tell anybody, oh, yeah, we're running about 30 minutes late or 20 minutes late. Do never give that information. If you need to say, well, this is the race that's coming down at the moment, or this is the race that's just started, it's up to the crews to ensure that they launch when they must make the decision as to when they're going to launch. Never give any kind of time unless it's coming from the POJ as an official time that there's that we are half an hour or something delayed. So strive for excellence and be professional and have fun. And now I'm going to hand over to Carol for anything else, or anybody has any questions. Gareth?
Thanks,
Gareth?
Evelyn. So,
Yeah.
thanks, Evelyn. So just two things. Because of the progression methodology for this regatta, there can be no swapping between races. If a crew misses their race, that's it. They cannot go into any other race. So that's just an important point. I know at other regattas you can, because it's the fastest or whatever the case might be, you could potentially put a crew into a later race. It cannot happen in this regatta. The second point, just with regards to row-throughs, because we're using the finish camera, we cannot cope with row-throughs. So just to make very sure, please, 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 no row-throughs.
So no 1 minute gaps.
No 1 minute gaps. And I wasn't guilty of a 1 minute gap last regatta, by the way. So yeah, that's okay. So just to note, we can deal with it manually, but on the camera system cannot deal with it. So, and guys, if you saw, I think Gordon's on the call, if you saw how close some of the championship regatta races are, we need the actual timing. So please just try and work with that, so we don't have the issue with row-throughs, or alternatively, one race literally finishing on top of another race becomes very problematic. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Sorry, I also just forgot to mention that please be at the morning meeting for the POJ to do her briefing. The specifics that she's going to be giving you, please be on time, be ahead of time, because it's very important to attend the morning meeting and to be early at your station. Carol?
Evelyn, so we're not going to get into the discussion of it now, but I do just want to raise, some of you may or may not be aware that there is a bit of, there is some tension around at the moment between the schools and junior clubs. And I just want to remind everyone it is very sensitive, and that while you are dressed as an official and while you are acting in an official capacity, you are not able to have an opinion on that. Okay, so just if you do get asked, or if someone tries to draw you into a conversation around it, if you are in your capacity as an official, you kind of just have to politely extract yourself from the conversation, or simply say, I'm unable to comment, or I don't have an opinion. Okay, thanks.
Switzerland.
Cool.
Anybody else? Okay, well, thanks very much, everybody. And sorry we ran a bit late there. I'm very pleased that everybody attended, and hope we have a really good weekend. Oh, Denise has got your hand up. Denise?
If there's anyone who would like to pilot tomorrow, could you send me a message? We've just had 2 pilots cancel. So if you could just message me, that would be great. And then tomorrow we have brand new radios. So please take care of them, sign for them, and return them.
Okay, thank